So thank you very much for the invitation. And I would like to apologize also to the steering committee or the organizing committee for my lack of prompt responses. And that's really apologize. And I am extremely pleased to be invited. I know some of you, I know Sima, I know Monorajan, Prole, and other people. I came to India many years ago in 2014 at the invitation of Rohini, and it was a great experience for me. So, and I've worked with Prole in Atlas. And also some other people I worked with in the past, Monorajan as well, and Shrida. We did the Lezush workshop and so forth. So I have a lot of history with many people. And I would like to start with some of the fundamentals, which many of you know and so forth, but I think it's very good for us to go back to some of these things to try to really understand why are we doing what we are doing and where exactly are we headed. I think everybody knows this painting of the French artist Paul Gauguin, which was meant to answer some fundamental questions about our place in the universe. And it's similar to what we are trying to do in particle physics by asking also deep questions about what is the nature or structure of matter in the universe and what are the dynamics and how can we make sense of the universe around us. And so some of these questions we can try to address at the LHC, some we cannot. But our job is to ask questions and then to try to see how to answer them. And a number of these questions require physics beyond the standard model. And one of these theoretical proposal is about supersymmetry and so forth, but we haven't found any convincing evidence of anything yet. So what we do know, or what we believe, is that billions of years ago, the universe started with a Big Bang, although we don't know anything else, before that. And matter appeared at some point during that process in the time evolution and so forth. Then maybe dark matter also appeared around picoseconds. And then there will be, they start having structure formation, protons and neutrons and so forth, nuclei, and then the first atoms around 300,000 years later. And now we are here as human beings. We try to understand it all. We look at this big universal scale from the Big Bang to the large scale structures that we have right now. We have understood that matter is composed of molecules which have atoms and which have nucleus and electrons, clouds. And then, eventually we know that there are quarks in the protons and the neutrons. And we have devised accelerators. The most powerful we have today is the Large Hadron Collider. And we have powerful telescopes that are looking into the large scale structure in the universe. And when you combine these extremes, then you have some sort of symbiosis between particle physics, astrophysics, and cosmology, where we look at the two extremes and trying to make a comprehensive structural understanding of our universe. Now, in that process, we've learned that there are a bunch of particles flying around. They are coming from the outer space, cosmic rays. They are going to our body, to everything. And one thing that happened is that, okay, we want to study these particles, but we really cannot do that effectively because we cannot control their directions. We cannot control their energy and momentum, and they come in many different types. So to do this, to study them effectively and to study some of the questions that we are posing, we need to go and build accelerators. So that's how our journey started, to build these more and more powerful accelerators. And then what happened? Well, our theories friends who are also a part of this journey to try to guide us about where we should look, and they came up with the standard model of particle physics, which we all believe is the most successful theory in the history of physics. So impressive that you look at this picture here, you know, where the number of neutrino flavors that are predicted, that this is just one of the prediction, right? And you see the line green there for the three neutrino flavors, which align perfectly with the data, whereas other suggestions don't, you know, are in gross disagreement with the data. So this model is extremely, very, very successful, and we all love it. It has been tested and tested again. But then, you know, out of that, what do we understand? We understand that, okay, there are fundamental particles, they are the quarks, and the leptons, and there are the forces, except that gravity is not a part of the standard model, but it's the first force that we learn and know very well, although it's not a part of it. Okay. So out of these, we have what we can call the cosmic DNA. That's fine. Out of all of these things, we believe that we can build the structure of the visible universe, essentially what we can see from accelerators, from telescopes, and from naked eye. That's the visible universe, okay? But there is a question in this thing that we just don't know. One of the things that the standard model did not provide for us is why the masses of these particles are the way they are. Yeah, what is responsible for these particles, in fact, having the masses, okay? Well, we came up with this Higgs boson idea, which, you know, is again the direction that theories have given us. The problem goes back all the way to Newton, where we know that weight is proportional to mass. That's what we first learned in physics. And then we later learned that energy is proportional to mass, but we didn't really know the nature of mass and where it comes from, at least for the fundamental particle. So Peter Higgs and other people believe that they know the answer. They proposed the Higgs boson idea, which we can conceptualize in thinking like the particle gets the masses by the way they interact with the Higgs fields, like how you will fly if you are moving on a ski, or you will sink into the snow if you have a snowshoes, or you will even sink deeper if you are just moving on the snow field with barefoot. So the difficulty in moving in that field of snow, which we can think of as the Higgs boson, is that difficulty, that interaction, that coupling, the way you are coupling to the field of the snow is exactly the way particles are coupling to the field of the Higgs boson. And that's what is generating the mass. Okay, nice. But now the snowflakes themselves are the Higgs boson, the particles. Yeah. So those are the snowflakes. It's a great idea, but can we find the Higgs boson? So we built this giant accelerator, 27 kilometers circumference at the border of Switzerland and France. And it has 4 experiments of 4 detectors on it. One of them is Atlas. I know India has been CMS, one of the general purpose detectors, and has had great contributions there. And then we have LHCb, and we also have ALICE. So these detectors eventually started taking data. They all have a little bit of different type of focus. Atlas and CMS are looking for more general purpose. They try to look for the Higgs boson, that snowflake particles, if it really exists, if that idea is born out in nature, and dark matter, which also we don't understand. And ALICE try to understand that primordial soup when the Big Bang started, when nucleus have not yet formed and everything is just basically soup. They're trying to understand that, and LHCb wants to understand what is the nature for the matter-antimatter difference or asymmetry in the universe, which we also don't understand from the standard model. Okay, so these detectors have been installed, they have been operating, and they have had great success. I'm showing here the Atlas example. You see beyond in the background there, the Jura Mountains. It's deep underground, 100-meter underground. You have one beam coming from one direction, another beam of protons coming from the other direction. They meet in the center of the detector. There is a collision. We study the debris from the collision, and we want to see whether we can get hints of new physics beyond the standard model, whether we can find the Higgs bosons in those debris. That's why we have this a great many scientists working in this type of activities. All right, so, and these are international project. I'm showing here the distribution of the home country of scientists working at CERN, maybe working on CMS or Atlas and so forth. And you see that these are international projects. And I would like to point out the human aspect, and through this project, how we scientists in particle physics can work together. I mentioned before that I know a lot of people from India through my journey at CERN and particle physics that I would not have met otherwise. And I think likewise, you might say the same thing. That, for me, is the dimension that we should stress, how this bring the work, the work we are doing brings the world together and help us into intercultural understanding and understanding each other, and stresses our humanity, how similar and the same we are, that the differences that we have are really small compared to all the things that bind us together. And I think we as physicists should stress that, you know, and it's even more deeper than that, where these complicated detectors that require a lot of engineering, they were all built component by component in different areas of the world, different places with just technical specification, and they have to match together and they have to operate well. It's a, you know, a remarkable piece of engineering by saying that, you know, by working together, we can achieve great things, and our differences with all the problem in the world really should not be, you know, those things that divide us. So 3,000 physicists and engineers to build this detector. For CMS, it's also essentially the same. Like I said, it's a marvelous piece of engineering when you start peeling it off from the ground. It's not a tabletop experiment. You can say, okay, why this much money to do this big giant toy for particle physicists to play with and try to understand, pose big questions and try to understand them. But, you know, we have a huge amount of capacity development. 1,000 PhDs are being produced in this each of these experiments. Many of them go into other industries, finance and engineering and so forth. And like I said, that commonality, that where we are bringing the world together. And compared to the budget that is spent on each country's military spending, it's really minuscule, okay? And we have to start saying those things for the public when you start asking that question, why are you spending that much money? But it's really minuscule compared to other budgets spendings. So now we build those giant detectors, and before we even do any physics, we have to do calibration. We have to make sure that we understand the detector. The best way for us to do that is to measure what is already known. And I would like to show this picture, and I really want to stress the importance of this. Okay, you see this bump, these peaks here, each of them represent particles of the standard model that were already discovered. Many of them by their own discovery led to Nobel Prize in physics, okay? And now when we build our detector for the LHC, we turn on our detector. Within few months, we rediscover all of these particles at the exact position on the x-axis. That's the position is the mass of the particle, and you know how wide the peak is tells us about physics. When you have removed the detector resolution, the width is an important physics information. The height of the bump tell us about something about the rate. So each of these things has a lot of physics, maybe 50 years prior physics packed into one plot here, because like I said, each of these particles are real standard model particles, and their discovery have led by one to Nobel Prizes in physics. And we have discovered this first at the correct rate, correct width, and correct mass within few months. It's remarkable. It's really remarkable. Before you even talk about the Higgs boson, you should really explain these things to people that this plot by itself is remarkable because it's 50 years of physics that is packed into one plot. So now we are confident that we understand our detector is operating the way we expect. We have done things right. So how do we search for the Higgs boson and new things? Yeah, so theories have told us that there is a way that it should be produced, the gluon fusion, which is the process over here. And we also have the VBF, vector boson fusion, where we have two forward jets with rapidity gap and produced with the Higgs boson or associated production with a vector boson or TT bar. They give us the rates of which each of these processes should appear in our detector during the collision. That's what is in the left plot over here. The vertical gray bar is where we eventually discover the Higgs boson at 125 or so GeV. Yeah, and on the right plots, also the theories calculated the rate at which the Higgs boson would decay. Yeah, just like the snowflake is going to melt. You know, when the temperature rises, the Higgs boson doesn't stay for long, it will decay very quickly. Now it decays into a bunch of other things, and these lines here are the rates. But when this plot was being made, we didn't know the mass. The x-axis is the mass of the Higgs boson. We didn't know it. So this plot has to be made as a function of the unknown Higgs boson mass. Then eventually we discover it at 125 GeV. And that discovery happened in July 2012. There were two primarily decay channels that were used. You see the gamma, the 2-photon decay channel here, down there, and the ZZ channel, which is this one, which goes into 4 leptons. So those were the two channels that were used to announce the Higgs discovery in July 2012. And here's the bump in the gamma channel, and here's the bump in the Higgs to 4-lepton channel through the ZZ decay channel. So there was a lot of excitement. Then it didn't end there. So now we discovered the Higgs, and okay, so it seems to confirm the standard model. The last piece is there. It's explaining the masses of the elementary particles. But of course, you see here that there are many other decay channels. Yeah. So the question was, the particle that we discovered, is it really the Higgs boson? And if it is the Higgs boson, where are these other decay channels? How do we find them? So Atlas and CMS did a lot of work since 2012. And first, we rediscovered the Higgs boson when we collected more data. That was the first question, you know, if this thing is a statistical flux. If you collect more data, the bump will disappear. It didn't disappear, it grew. That's what you see here on the left plot. Then we went after each of the other decay channel. On the top middle plot over there is the Higgs to WW. Okay, I just want you to, you know, follow me. The Higgs to WW is this decay channel here, and it is not very easy to find because the W would decay semi-leptonically, and neutrinos or jets, those are things that are complicated to understand. We use these photon channel and leptons, electron and muon channels, because they are the easiest to understand, the easiest to calibrate. And although you will see here that the photon channel is very suppressed relative to the other one. By the way, the y-axis here is the rate, or the branching ratio, how often the Higgs will decay into one particular channel. And you see that most of the time you should go into this BB bar, but nevertheless, it's the photon channel that provides the discovery first. Why? Because it's easier to measure and calibrate photons than to go and find B jets. Okay. And the same thing for the ZZ to 4 leptons. Okay, those channels, although the rates are relatively small, because leptons and photons are easier to detect and to calibrate, those were the ones that were used for the discovery. But then the question is, we need to find the other one. First, we need to confirm that the discovery is not a fluke, and we need to find the other channel. The top middle.
Yeah. You have about 10 minutes. Just
yeah, that's fine. Thank you. The middle plot here is the Higgs to WW, which decays to leptons and neutrinos here. The bottom plot here is the Higgs to tau channel, and then the Higgs to BB channel. So all of these channels, they came with a significance over 5 sigma. And so the significance is how strong the signal is, and these are global significance. And when you reach 5 sigma and above, we really have confirmed the discovery. We have confidence to the highest degree that this is not a fluke. Okay, so then we try to go and measure the property. Okay, fine, we've seen these things. How do we know that it's the Higgs boson? Because the Higgs boson should be a scalar particle. It should have some spin and CP properties, and so forth. And we should measure the rate. Does the rate matches with the standard model? That's the top plot over there. Yeah, the x-axis is the relative rates to the standard model. If it is at 1, then it's confirmed to be the standard model rate. Yeah, and the dot points are the measurements, and the horizontal bars around the dots are the uncertainties, and they all basically cross 1. So they are consistent with the standard model, but there is an uncertainty. Okay, then we went ahead and measured the mass precisely. That's the bottom left plot. Then we went and test the spin and CP property. Is it really a spin zero object? You can see in the blue dot that, which is the spin zero hypothesis, is more consistent with the data. Then the relative strength, how big is the signal with respect to the standard model? Yeah, this is also the bottom middle plot over there. It's consistent with the standard model, but there's a deviation, some errors. And then I would like you, the right plot here, you should also stare at that. It's extremely important how each particle couples to the Higgs boson. Yeah? I made the analogy of the snowflakes, that you are either on the ski, you go fast, or you are sinking in the snow, your motion is hampered. Okay, that's, you can see that the coupling is proportional to the mass. The one that have the bigger mass or have this bigger coupling strength, but everything is according to what the Higgs has said. Yeah, the dashed line is the standard model. You see how everything just matches for all of these particles. This plot is remarkable. It's amazing, and you should show it to people and explain it to them so that they can appreciate what is being shown here. Okay. Then the other thing that we did was like, okay, does the Higgs decay into some other particles that we don't know, not just the standard model particles? So what this plot is showing you here is by doing a global fit of all of the measurements that we have made, with an unknown parameter being the decay rate into non-standard model particles. When you do that, yeah, so you basically have this a horizontal red line here, which is crossing the black and the blue dash line. And where they cross, when you project it to the y-axis, which is the contribution of this BSM beyond the standard model particles, it can be as high as 30%. Okay, that's just due to the fact that we have all of these uncertainties coming from theory and coming from the detector measurement. So there could be a Higgs decaying into beyond standard model particles with a rate that could be quite high. So we need to still search for them. What is one example of this beyond the standard model particle is dark matter, which we have gravitational evidence, as you see in this plot, that you cannot match the data unless you assume this dark halo that we don't know anything about. If you basically assume only Newton's gravity and so forth, you're going to have the stellar disk and the gas. You have to put in this dark halo to match the data. So that's the evidence for dark matter. It's out there, but it's a gravitational evidence. But can we find it in experiments on Earth? So dark matter itself could be a part of a dark sector, a set of dark sector particles that interact weakly with the standard model. That's where I do my research work. Here is the standard model of cosmology that says that much of it is dark energy, of which we know not much about. And it's some 20 or so to 25% of the energy budget of the universe is really in dark matter form, which we know nothing about except for the gravitational evidence. And all the things that standard model of particle physics is talking about is this 5% here. So there's much that we still don't know. So there could be the standard model here in this bottom right plot, and there could be some mediating forces that connects to the dark sector, and within that sector, one of the particles could be dark matter. So that's one theoretical set of ideas. The other one is for supersymmetry, symmetry between bosons and fermions, and that leads to a whole new set of particles that one of them could be stable and might be candidate for dark matter. None of these things we have seen. We're searching for them. One of the searches we are doing at the LHC is to have Higgs decay into invisible. And now, why invisible? Because if the Higgs decay into two dark matter particles that are weakly interacting with standard model particles, they will just fly to the detector. They carry away energy. You don't see them. That's why the detector doesn't detect them directly. That's why they are invisible. That's an example over here where the Higgs decay into two dark matter particles, and we only have the forward jet coming from VBF, and we have some backgrounds. So what you have to do is that you detect everything else, you make assume four momentum conservation, because you know the two protons that are colliding at the center. Four momentum conservation allow you to say that, okay, some energy is in balance or some momentum is in balance that is carried away by the particle that you don't detect. That's what we call missing energy or missing momentum. And you see here that when we search for this process, we don't see anything. Data and background expectations, they look essentially the same. So we can now put a limit on this Higgs to invisible branching ratio. So it's a limit of about 13%. And then we can use that limit to do an interpretation of dark matter collision with ordinary matter particles, and then compare with the direct detection experiments. So that's what you see in this plot here. There are different types of models. What I would like to show you is that since we are assuming that the Higgs is decaying into two dark matter particles, then there is conservation also of, the decay has to be open up to half of the Higgs mass. That's what you have here. So the LHC is sensitive to from the lower mass range up to half of the Higgs mass. And in some cases, depending on the realization, it could actually be complementary to what direct detection experiments are bringing, okay? And then we can also look for dark sector state, like other particles that are in the dark sector, but that are not dark matter. So in this particular case, we have dark vector bosons, which may decay back into standard model particle in terms of 4 leptons. Yeah, so that's what you are seeing here. In the low mass range is the top right plot up to 20 GeV. The gray band is basically the upsilon and the gypsy, where we veto that region, we don't look in there. And the colors are the signal if they will appear, okay? We see no event here. And we also did another search in the high mass region where we have a dark vector boson produced with the standard model vector boson, and we don't see anything here. And also now we also search for the Higgs decaying into two dark vector boson. That's this plot over here, and everything is summarized in this limit plot on the cross section. We have some small excesses here that are being investigated still. And you know, this can be summarized in what we call the kinetic mixing, because what happened is that since you know the dark sector doesn't couple directly, you know, couple weakly, you have to find a ways of realizing that coupling. One of them is the kinetic mixing, which is basically a mixing between the dark photon and our standard model photons. And here is a plot that shows a parameter space with things that are excluded as a function of the dark photon mass. So dark vector boson, dark photon, dark Z, they are essentially the same thing. A dark photon can have a mass. A dark photon just means it's a photon in the dark sector, okay? As a kinetic mixing as a function of dark photon mass, you see where ATLAS and CMS have ruled out some of these realizations. And depending on what you assume for the kinetic mixing, these dark photons can be prompt or it can be long-lived. So we have searched for the prompt and the long-lived as well. We haven't found anything. Now going to the high luminosity LHC, what can we expect? Studies have been going on in ATLAS, so fortunately I couldn't show some of the things that are going on because they are not fully approved, but I wanted to show only one plot where we are studying you know, the di-Higgs production to 4Bs. And you see here in this right plot as a function of the di-Higgs mass, we have here most of the background is going to be QCD. Yeah, so you have to categorize this background as the true BJet or your ability to be able to tag BJet because you have 4 of them. Here's what we expect for the normal projection for the to high LHC luminosity, which is the second column there, and the third column is for the high PILAB density environment and so forth, because the accelerator is going to optimize according to the PILAB density. So there are some promises, and we hope that when we go to the high luminosity LHC, we will have enough luminosity to try to see some of these unseen particles that are beyond the standard model. LHC is so far the most powerful microscope to look really deep, and it's also a telescope because it's allowing us to address and help our friends in astrophysics and cosmology to address the big question about dark matter and so forth by looking for these particles. So to come to the end of my talk, I would say that the Higgs boson is a particle responsible for giving masses to elementary particles, has been discovered, and the discovery has been confirmed later on. There's no doubt about that. And since then, we have also measured the property that seems to be consistent with what the standard model is telling us. But it's consistent within uncertainties, which means that it leaves some room for something beyond the standard model. So one can ask the question, can we now use the Higgs boson that we discovered as a handle to search for new physics, the nature of dark matter, search for supersymmetry, because they can appear either associated with the Higgs or in the decay of the Higgs boson. We've searched for those things. So far, we haven't found anything. So at the moment, the Large Hadron Collider is preparing for a new batch of data for round 3 where we collect a significant more amount of data. Maybe we'll begin to find if there's any signal emerging, it will become strong enough for us to see that we have an evidence. If not, we are also expecting the high luminosity LHC to offer a potential for more discovery. All right, so I will stop there.
Thank you for this update on the Higgs sector. Time for a couple of quick questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question for Ketavi, or just go ahead, unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I wanted to one question, Ketavi, is what is the next most important thing in the Higgs that the group should look at with RON2 data, RON3 data?
Yeah, I think for RON3 data, I think there were, I think for, at least for Atlas, there are a few excess that appear in some of the Higgs analysis, like this Higgs to 4-lepton final state, and have some excesses that needs to be looked at. Higgs to invisible, for example, is a channel that is really highly of interest. We really need to get here branching ratio limit of 13%. If we can get it better than that, it would be great, but it doesn't look like we can really get, as any better than maybe 10% or 8-9% or so. You see where the standard model is actually sitting. So we are looking for a signal that is really much bigger than that, but we need to have an ability to control the systematics better so that this measurement can become more precise. The property measurement. So there are two things. If we measure the Higgs property very, very precisely, then we can tell whether there is something there or not. Yeah, these uncertainties, for example, if they can be reduced, then the window for new physics either shrink or we really see something completely beyond the standard model. So the precision measurements are extremely important because they give us a handle of what we really know very, very well. Then if there's something new there, it becomes clearly, an evidence of new physics.
What I meant is basically, is there something that we have not looked at it and that we would preferably try to look at in RON3 data?
So, I think theories can give us a lot of guidance in some of the other things that we have not looked at. For example, we've searched a lot of exotic final states that are different theory proposed, which I didn't put over here, that have not produced anything. SUSY has been searched for in a high degree of the parameter space without anything. Then there are this dark sector model that came along, which also have been searched for. A lot of these dark sector states, final state, have been proposed. I only mentioned two here, the Higgs to invisible and the Higgs to 4-lepton cases, but there are a whole lot of them that we have studied, none of which has produced any conclusive evidence so far. So I think in RON3, all of this analysis will continue. The precision measurements of the standard model properties and so forth will also be needed to get the uncertainties down. And then if there are other directions that we should look at, that our colleagues in theory can suggest, that will be fine. But otherwise, I think what I expect will happen is that all of the current searches will be carried forward in RON3 to try to get the uncertainties down, and where there are small excesses, people want to see whether those excesses grow with much better control on the uncertainties.
I understand.
And we really claim something.
I understand.
Yeah.
Manoranjan?
Hi, KTV.
I'm Mono.
Hi. So your measurement of upper limit of Higgs branching ratio into invisible sector. So this measurement is based on only the BBF channel. What
Yes,
is-
this 13% is our latest gas coming from VBF channel.
so
The other
that-
channels which are associated production with Z goes to lepton,
Yes.
and also associated production from with a vector boson that goes to jet. Also, there's the mono jet production. All of those things, they don't really offer a powerful contribution in the combination. We have done combination with all of them. I didn't show it here, but it doesn't really reduce this 13% any better. So the dominant channel so far is still the Higgs to the VBF Higgs to invisible.
No. My question is the associated products are the ZH channel and also the TTH channel. Okay. If you add the contribution, so then this limit will go down more, right?
Yeah, it will go down more. We have done that. I don't have an example of that yet.
Okay.
But my point, Mono, is that it doesn't go down significantly. That the channel that is dominant in the contribution is the VBF one. The other one, they don't really, because this channel really has the power of beating down the background when you consider when you use W control regions and Z control regions to get a handle of the Z to new background, which is the most.
Yes. This is the best channel for to probe this branching ratio.
Yes, yeah. So the other one are there. Yeah, we are looking at the other one too. So maybe when it's possible, I think there are some people who have said that if you go to other accelerator, for example, IRC and so forth, the VBF will not bring anything there. You have to go to the other channels, which is true. Yeah, but where we are right now, we have groups that are looking at the ZH and the TTH, the VH and so forth, and their contribution are certainly useful. But when you do the combination, the VBF is really the strong channel, and there's a lot of people are pursuing that.
Okay, thanks, KTV.
Thank you, Mono.
So I don't see any other hands raised. So unless there is any other pressing question, let's thank KTV again, and let's thank all the speakers of the session again, and all of you who have asked questions.